CBS Sports coming up with a ranking of the top football coaches for the season. And Coach Hugh Freeze, of course, makes the ranking for that. We'll just take a look at what the rankings are for SEC coaches. Is at no surprise, number one being Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is ranked right now, according to the CBS poll, as the number one coach in all of college football. Again, I don't think anybody is super surprised by that. But yeah, Coach Smart. I mean, with last season, that was an improvement from number two to number one for Coach Kirby Smart. He was ranked as the number two coach last year. And of course, with the retirement of the GOAT, Nick Saban, he moves up to take on that number one spot. And of course, with him being number one in the country, he is also number one in the SEC. Next up on the list for SEC coaches, who would have been, again, everybody pretty much just bumped up one from where they were automatically with Coach Kirby, with Nick Saban leaving as far as in the conference. But next up is Brian Kelly, who comes in at number 4 overall in the country. He is up 2 spots from last year's CBS ranking for coaches in the country. Brian Kelly, the coach of LSU, now ranked as the number 4 overall in the country and number 2 in the SEC. I guess that's fair. I mean, we talk about a lot of these off-season rankings and, whether or not that makes any sense. But Brian Kelly, number 2 in the conference, I'm not mad at it, right? I mean, he hasn't really won anything, but not really, not neither have any of the other coaches in the conference that are left in here. But he does have, a Heisman guy on his roster from last season, and they did really well a couple of seasons ago, making it to the SEC title game. And I don't think, as I look down this list of coaches for the SEC, that there's anybody else on this list who can say that they've made even though it's now defunct, there are no more divisions in the SEC. There are no other division champs on this list as I'm looking down it. So, I mean, I don't think Brian Kelly at the second rated coach in the SEC, number 4 overall in the country, is crazy. I did skip over some, names and looking at, who was ranked like 2 and 3. I can venture a guess without even having to look at the list that Ohio State's head coach is up there at the top, and probably the guy over there at USC is probably in that top 5 ranking as well. Next up on the list, which again, I'm not mad at it, number 5 overall in the country, Steve Sarkeesian is ranked number 5. He is the 3rd highest ranked coach. He climbs an astounding 32 spots in the ranking. And what he's done at Texas has been amazing. Last year, make the college football playoff. He's coming into the SEC with a lot of momentum for that Texas program. Not mad at this ranking either. I think, Steve Sarkeesian, we talked about this on the last program, is probably the best play caller in the country, right? And as someone who recruits as well as he does, having that Texas brand behind him and all of the wonderful things that they are able to do on that offense, and then just having the caliber of athletes that he's able to get from Texas. He got a lot of the talent that left in the transfer portal from Alabama over into his coffers in this past season. So I think there's a high expectation right now for Steve Sarkeesian, but 32 spots is a huge climb. And a phenomenal job being done right now for Steve Sarkeesian. It's going to be interesting to see first year in the SEC how that pans out. But yeah, Steve Sarkeesian, Sark number 3 in the SEC. Coming in at number 4. This is where I get into, I don't know, cuz Kalen DeBoer, the Alabama head coach, number 7 overall. I don't know. He did a great job at I question whether or not him being at Washington, whether he still is in the top 10. I mean, he made the college football playoff final last season. If he was still at Washington, would he be a top 10 coach right now? Did he get a little bit of that crimson boost? I don't know, but Kalen DeBoer ranked now at the number 7 overall coach in the country, putting him at the 4th highest ranked coach according to CBS in the SEC. Again, I'm not necessarily mad at it, but he did jump 11 spots. So I do wonder if he jumps 11 spots um, just off of the strength of what he did last year and what he would have going on this year at Washington. I find it hard to believe. I'm not saying it's impossible, but he does have now the brand of those crimson and white guys behind him, and he has a lot of things that he's going to have working in his favor to keep him at the top. But number 7 overall in the country feels a little high. Feels a little high for him. I'm just not sure whether or not I believe he's the number 7 coach overall in the country right now. But again, I did skip over some of the other names. Maybe there's I don't know what names are behind him that I'd put in front of him, so I'd have to go look at the list a little more comprehensively. I did kind of skim through and try to look to see where the SEC coaches were ranked. But yeah, I feel like 7 just feels a little high for me. So we'll see what happens with Kalen DeBoer next season with Bama. And again, I think he's a good coach. This is not saying that I don't think that Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. I don't know that he's a top 10 coach in the country, but we'll definitely find out whether or not that is going to be the case coming up this season when he's having to play more consistently teams that I think will have better talent around them and better defenses more consistently. So we'll see. But number 7, climbing 11 spots in the most recent CBS ranking, Kalen DeBoer.
Four-star linebacker Tyler Lockhart recently became the 10th commitment of Auburn's 2025 class. Tyler is currently ranked 163rd overall and 10th at the linebacker position, according to Rivals.com. Out of Winona, Mississippi, Tyler shot up the rankings after a massive junior season in which he tallied 100 tackles, 28 tackles for loss, and 11 sacks. A physical defender with great upper body strength and a nose for the football, Lockhart should be a perfect fit for DJ Durkin's system. Heavily pursued by the Alabama Crimson Tide and even crystal ball to Mississippi State at one point in time, gaining the commitment of Tyler Lockhart was big time for Hugh Freeze and his Auburn program.
Today's quick cut was brought to you by the folks over at MANSCAPED. Are you ready to soak up some summer vibes and unveil your ultimate beach body? Well, you're in luck because our friends at Manscaped have you covered from head to toe with the Performance Package 5.0. This ultimate all-in-one grooming kit is set to have you looking and feeling your best this summer in the sun. Trust Manscaped and unlock your confidence that you'll need to turn heads this season. Join 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by heading over to manscaped.com and using code RAPPORT for 20% off plus free shipping. Let's make this summer your smoothest one yet. Number 14, and next on the list as far as SEC coaches, is our folks at the Broken Ugly School. Lane Kiffin coming in at number 14. He was 14 last year. He is 14 again this year. Lane Kiffin is who he is. I mean, he hasn't been bad. Like, I think he is probably a top 15, top 20 coach in the country. I think that he has been consistently who he has been for the entirety of his coaching career, with guys who have jumped up in front of him like Sark and Kalen DeBoer. That means that he holds pat at where he is, even with the departure of Nick Saban from that coaching list right there. So, I mean, somebody else jumped in front of him. Right. So they had 2 jump in front of him. You remove 1, he stays right where he is. So Lane Kiffin kind of just is who he is, man. He's a guy that's they're going to be in the conversation now for college football playoff coming into this season. We talked about this on the last show about Lane Kiffin, and, this is really a make or break year for Lane Kiffin as far as cementing his not legacy, right? I think if he wants to go down as one of the best college coaches, in this era, he's got to make the college football playoff this season. And I think that he's got to win at least one game. I don't think just making it, because that's if college football playoff, the expanded 12-team college football playoff happened last year, he'd have made it last season more than likely. So I don't think finishing in the top 12 is going to be enough for Lane Kiffin this season to really put him into a conversation of that next tier coach. He's going to have to get in, and he's going to have to win at least one of those games in that playoff, I think, to elevate him in the minds of the national punditry around where he is as a head coach. He just has not really fared well when he's gone against the best coaches, particularly, the likes of Nick Saban traditionally. Kirby Smart hasn't really done great against those coaches, but I do think that Lane Kiffin now has one of the most talented teams that he's ever coached. He's got a third-year returning starter at quarterback, something that I don't think he's ever had in his career as a collegiate head coach. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to produce this season at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. Coming in at number 14, number 6, uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, number 5, overall in the rankings for the SEC coaches. Next up on this list, we have Kentucky's Mark Stoops at number 20, dropping 2 spots. He was number 18 last year. Mark Stoops, a good head coach. No doubt about it. There were rumors around whether or not Mark Stoops was going to be getting one of these coaching vacancies during the offseason. He's had Kentucky in the conversation perennially now in the SEC East. Is he a top 20 coach in the country? Again, I'd have to look at the other names that I've skipped over here as to whether or not he's a top 20 coach. 6th overall coach in the conference. I still think, even though last year the results weren't as good, I think Josh Heupel is still getting kind of, and we'll get to where his name is on this list, but I think Josh Heupel still getting a little disrespected on this list. I personally would say that Josh Heupel is probably a better coach than Mark Stoops, but they're not far behind each other when I'm looking at the rankings, so, I don't think that that's a crazy statement to make as far as where they are relative to one another. But I think it's being a little I think Josh Heupel's being a little disrespected, maybe because he hasn't coached as long. And so they're trying to see whether or not he's going to have the longevity to be able to deliver a little bit more consistently. But as far as accomplishments as coaches, they've accomplished nearly the same stuff, right? Like, Stoops hasn't won anything as far as a division crown. He hasn't won anything, any. What big upsets has he pulled off other than maybe head to head with Heupel, them being able to go head to head and winning those games? I don't know what the reasoning is. Actually, let me see if I can. CBS actually gave their reasoning for what they have for these coaches. Let me pull that up and see what they had to say about the reasoning why he's number 20 on this list. All right. So he said, interesting. They said, considering the university didn't want to pay Calipari's buyout, then Calipari left to take an Arkansas job. We can now definitively say that Kentucky's a football school. That's funny. He says it half jokingly. He says Stoops is 73-65 with 2 10-win seasons in 11 years with the Wildcats. Like I said, that's not like super impressive to me. 11 seasons. I mean, at Kentucky, it's fairly impressive, 2 10-win seasons, but 73-65 as a coach. And I just think that he's flatlined a little bit as far as trajectory. I don't know. I mean, do people expect Kentucky to have a good year this year? I don't know, man. I don't know the answer to that. 20 feels a little high, especially if you're looking at the people who are ranked below him on this list. But Mark Stoops comes in at number 20 overall on this list. Next up on the list, the guy who made the second biggest climb, Steve Sarkeesian made the biggest one. The second biggest climb on this list at number 21, just behind Mark Stoops, is Eli Drinkwitz. And this is a guy I think he's gotten his fair share of criticism over the years for what he wasn't able to accomplish at Missouri, but he has Missouri in a good place right now to be able to make some real noise in this college football season. He is ranked number 21. He climbed 30 spots in the this recent poll, in this recent ranking, and I think he deserves it, man. I think that he has done an excellent job. I mean, let's just take a look at what they say about him. on this one. 11-2 last season, second in the SEC East, and beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, right? Like those are pretty good accomplishments to have. I mean, I don't know that that's worse. He's been, let me see how many years. How many years has he been at Missouri? Like 5 or 6 years? I don't know how many years he's been at Missouri. I think the in his small sample size at Missouri, I think he's done a better job. Right? Again, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think his resume head to head with the guy who's right in front of him, Mark Stoops, might look a little bit better. So I don't know. But yeah, Drinkwitz comes in at number 21 next on the list. And then next on this list is the other guy that we're talking about, number 23, which is Josh Heupel, which, again, I think Josh Heupel might be getting a little underrated on this list. He comes in at number 23 overall. Last year, he was ranked at number 16. He fell 7 slots. I mean, did what they did last year deserve him to bump back 7 spots? Like, who are the coaches that you feel like are better than him, that have a better resume than him? I think Josh Heupel, if I were doing this ranking, I think I would put Drinkwitz and Heupel over Stoops. I'd have both of those guys in front of Mark Stoops. Again, that's not to say that Mark Stoops not a good coach. I'd still have him probably in my top 25 coaches in the country. I think that, for what he's done with Kentucky, and I'm going back to Mark Stoops again, yeah, for what he's done at Kentucky with what they're able to procure from, the transfer portal and out of high school rankings, he's done an amazing job to be able to put that together into a competitive team year in and year out. They're always going to have a tough defense. Listen, we're going to play Kentucky this season at Auburn, so we're going to have an opportunity to see what he's got head to head this season and, put a lot of this to bed. But, and I'm not even saying this relative to what I think Coach Hugh Freeze is overall. Like I haven't even entered Coach Hugh Freeze into this conversation other than to tell you where he landed in the overall rankings. And I don't think where he is right now is really unfair as far as the hierarchy in the SEC. Again, there might be some coaches nationally that are getting a little bit more than they should for him, but I think I'd put the job that Eli Drinkwitz has done at Missouri and what Josh Heupel has done at Tennessee, even though I think Tennessee is a bigger brand, right? So he's got a little bit more to work with, but I think he's done a phenomenal job at Tennessee. I put them above Mark Stoops a little bit, but if you're going to ding somebody for the brand, then we got to throw out Kalen DeBoer for real at the jump that he made. But anyway, yeah, I think 23 is respectable for a guy like Josh Heupel. It's, top 25 coach in the country. Not mad at that. I think that that's a good place for him. Where he ranks in the SEC is what I would argue is probably a little bit, it isn't where I would want it to be. All right. That is it for the first half of this conversation. We're going to get into the second half, and we're going to talk about where Coach Hugh Freeze lands on this list. I've already buried the lead. He is number 33, and he is next up on the list, and we'll talk about some of the coaches that are just behind him. For full episodes, make sure you head over to the War Report's YouTube channel and check out the Weekend Tailgate. Every Sunday, we're going live. Join us on the live stream at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Until the next time, War Eagle.